Okay, so my first question to you is how you started working at G4 TV and Attack of the Show. What was the process to getting there? Um, who interviewed you? What was sort of like a little bit of your experience before? Tell me how you got to the place where you were consistently working at G4 TV and Attack.
Do you want me to start when I was at Blister at the beginning
Yeah,
of the network?
yeah. What was the pathway that got you there? And also, I should just introduce Mike Dunn is talking to us right now. And I always call you Mike Dunn. I notice you say Michael. Is it Michael or Mike Dunn?
It's Mike. Yeah.
Mike. Okay. I always said Mike.
Yeah. I go by Mike. Michael is just sort of a professional name, but I go by Mike. Yeah.
Gotcha. Okay. So tell me, like, what was your pathway to getting in, and sort of like your secret origin in effect?
So at the time, I was producing for E! Entertainment Television. A guy I knew that I worked with at E! had gone over to this brand new video gaming network called G4 TV. He said they needed producers. So I had applied and got a job there for a show called Blister. It was before the network had launched in 2001, and that was literally it. We were given a name of a show, and it was, you guys cover action and adventure video games. That was it. That's all we knew. They had started building the set for it. We had a host, and that was it. So we had to kind of come up with how we were going to make this show, create the content for it. It was studio-based and all that stuff. So it was a studio-based show, and we lasted about a year and a half, 2 years, and then they wanted to kind of reimagine the network. So they canceled a lot of the shows, let a lot of people off, me being one of them in my show. And about a month and a half later, the guy that was working he was a production manager, he said, hey, we need another production manager, another production coordinator and cameraman. Do you want the job? And it was weird because I had been producing TV for years before that. So, but I had also shot. I was also a shooter. I knew how to do that. And it just seemed like kind of a fun thing to do. It was kind of a change. I'd still be able to put on my producer cap and help the rest of the shows, help the other producers, but I enjoyed shooting. So I went over to G4, and that was in 2004. So I went over back to G4 as a production coordinator. And at the time, we didn't have any in-house cameramen. It was there was studio stuff, and then anything shot in the field was hired out. We were hired freelance crews, and some stuff we had some camera crewmen, and some stuff we shot, meaning the production coordinators or managers. Then one day, the production manager turned to me and said, "Hey, we're going to put two in-house crews together. Do you want to be one of them?" I said, "Yeah, that'll be fun." So bought a bunch of extra equipment, hired another camera guy, and I became one. So there was two crews, two-man teams, me camera and an audio guy. And around the same time, there was the G4 Tech TV merger. So we had all these different production teams come down from San Francisco and kind of created what was going to be the new G4 TV. So it was G4 Tech TV. They had they kind of merged some of the shows. They kept a lot of the stuff for a while, and eventually the network evolved into the one that everybody now remembers how it ended, with Attack of the Show and X-Play and all of the other things. So in the beginning, the network was trying to find itself. It was trying to really discover what its niche was, who its audience was, what programming worked, because this was groundbreaking. Nobody had done this kind of thing before. Not like this, not on a grand scale where it's an entire network with just, round-the-clock programming of different shows targeted towards video gaming and the culture. And so it was really fun at the time. And so that's essentially, I was there pre-Attack of the Show. And I remember when they were creating the show and trying to figure out the name. What were we going to call this thing? And I remember the day they said Attack of the Show. I want to say it was Mike Shaw that came up with that idea, but I could be wrong. I'm not sure. He was a producer. And I just remember thinking, wow, that's kind of crazy. And then that's where it kind of evolved. It was, we had X-Play, you had Attack of the Show. Attack of the Show now had to kind of invent what it was going to be in the space of G4. Invent what kind of content, what was it going to try to do with itself. And we were there to do all their field shoots. So they had their in-studio stuff, but all of the stuff they featured in terms of whether it was go to a video game maker, a company, a developer, you name it, and do interviews or go to events and cover, the event with interviews and B-roll shoots and all of the other stuff. Or like a lot of stuff that you saw on the network and X-Play and Attack the Show were big on doing this, was parody type stuff. So I did a lot of the parody type stuff too, which took on a more cinematic look, and that was something I really enjoyed doing and was good at, I guess, and had a lot of fun doing. And so that's kind of where my entry into Attack of the Show really was, is having been there, having kind of worked with a lot of the people that were on other shows that then went into Attack of the Show, and I had a working relationship, and so it just kind of grew from there. And then that was kind of my entry into Attack of the Show.
Well, in a way, it's almost like the beginning was kind of like a blended family, because you had people from Attack of the Show, you had people from Tech TV, people from G4, and then you're kind of even like, later on, like having to blend with then the people from E. And that was always really strange, because it was like, I always felt like I got a Revenge of the Nerds vibe, because all the people at E were like these incredibly attractive, both women and men. And then you got like the nerds, you got people walking around with Star Wars and Marvel and t-shirts, and before that was even cool to do, right? Like this is, so I do believe when G4 first launched, nerds were still not a thing that was cool to be a nerd. I'm talking about like 2004, 2005, like in that era, it's like it was still, there's some sort of shame attached to having a long box of comics or whatever. I mean, I think now that's like a badge of honor, but so it was, the sense I've gotten is it's always been sort of a messy beginning, but you, having begun as a producer and taken on the, field camera stuff and the parody stuff, although it doesn't surprise me you did the parody stuff, because it looked, because they were trying to go, especially on X-Play, trying to go for a specific visual style with those parodies. It really worked. What were some of your early memories during that messy sort of blended family that was beginning? Do you have recollections of meeting Adam Sessler, Morgan, Adam, Kevin Pereira? Like, do you have like sort of like your first memories of when you met them? And you might not, because for me, like, I don't, I really have to like dig in my brain of like when that happened. But, think about like, you're sort of first meeting them and kind of like, because there was like a groove that was gotten into. It wasn't right at the beginning. I mean, it wasn't, same thing as like Batman wasn't Batman the first time he put on the cowl. And the same, Attack of the Show is not Attack of the Show just because the name changed in March of 2005. It wasn't Attack of the Show yet. It was named that. And Sarah Lane was there, and Kevin Rose was there, and Kevin Pereira and Kevin Rose was like, what was that like? And do you have any specific recollections of meeting some of the hosts for the first time and working with them?
Yeah, absolutely. So no, I actually remember a lot of that. It was sort of a messy thing, because so the people from San Francisco came down, and that was what created the G4 TV Tech, or G4 Tech TV. And there was a lot of shows that were still kind of airing, and then they one by one started to kind of eliminate those shows. Some of the people went on to do other things. Some people stayed to create Attack of the Show. Guys like Kevin Rose, I didn't really know. He was studio. And he had a reputation, and kind of he had come there already with somebody that was kind of in the industry, well known for his thing. So I didn't get to know him too well, but I just remember that environment of everybody's struggling to try to figure out where they fit in with this new network and with the new show. Sarah Lane, all of them, like, and Brendan Moran, they were all like field correspondents. So I remember doing a lot of field shoots with them, whether it was, covering events or just special segments. And I got along great with Brendan Moran. He was hilarious, very funny personality. Sarah Lane was really sweet. So it was really easy going to work with them. I do remember Kevin Pereira, his beginnings were actually, I shot, and I'm sure the other camera guys at the time, Ryan Graham, did this too, but I think this was before Ryan Graham started. So Kevin Pereira is like kind of, before he was even host of Attack of the Show, I can't remember what it was. Was this for, he did, I'll say this in a more proper way. I'm trying to think here, Chris. I shot a thing where he did like little segments for one of the shows, and I think it was was it Pulse, which was the news show, because he was a PA at G4 before the changeover, before we moved to the Olympic and Bundy building. I think that's what it was, or it was G4 News or whatever it was. So I'll just kind of leave that out because I don't remember exactly. I just remember, so Kevin was doing solo segments within another show, and it was just him sitting in one of the game rooms. It was like the game capture room, and it was just me. I set up a couple of lights, set up a camera, and he would have a video game, and he would just talk to camera. I think it was just reviewing the game. And it was very modest, it was very small. It was just me and him in there, and the audio guy, and he would just be loved up, and we would do this thing. And I knew right away Kevin was special. I knew he was going to be somebody more than just doing these field segments. He had a charisma and a charm and a natural sort of flair for what he ended up doing and becoming. And I just kind of knew it right away. And so it was no surprise when things evolved to the point where he was host of the show. It was kind of a given, and it felt very, very like, of course, this is what we're going to do. So that was a lot of fun. And of course, with X-Play, Morgan and Adam, it was just, that was a blast, because it was such that whole period where it was kind of messy and everybody's figuring out what was going on. It was like some sort of mad monk squadron of people just wanting to have a great time making fun content, and really committed to making this a successful thing, because it hadn't been done before. We wanted to kind of create something that hadn't been done before and have it be this huge and leave a legacy, whatever that was going to be. And I know nobody really talked about it like that, but you could feel that's what it was. And everybody just kind of finding their way, and it seemed like everybody got along well, especially in the beginning, because it was fun. It was kind of, loose from the hip type stuff, before it finally started to find its voice, the shows and the network, and really start to get into what it ultimately would become. But yeah, for definitely for Kevin, that was my recollection of his beginnings. You remind me, who was the initial host for Attack of the Show? Was it Kevin?
The lineup was Kevin, Rose, Kevin Pereira, and Sarah Lane.
Okay, that was the initial three. Okay.
So within the first year, Kevin Rose left because he didn't like the direction of the show. It was becoming more broad in its and more leaning towards humor rather than tech. And then Sarah Lane met
Screensavers. That's what it was.
It was called the Screensavers before that. And then I have what I'm trying to do with every interview is I'm trying to get like background on a certain aspect of the show. And Robert Juster gave me a very good like breakdown of like, what the sort of historical transition was. And then it was Sarah Lane, and then she met a guy who did like funny field pieces and bits. They kind of fell in love, and she left on like this. She was going to travel the world for a year, like Luke and Laura from General Hospital.
That was Brendan Moran.
Brendan Moran, yes.
Yeah, because he was a field correspondent as well.
Yeah, and he had like a bunch of comedy segments that he did, and the two of them fell for each other, work romance, and she decided to leave. I think a lot of the people, it was hard, the transition, I know, for the people that came from the Bay Area down to LA.
Yeah.
There's definitely a thing, I've noticed this just from like friends who, there's a weird rivalry between San Francisco and LA. San Francisco does not like LA, and LA doesn't care. That's LA is like, whenever everyone like, oh, I love San Francisco, that's what an LA person would say. And San Francisco person would say, I can't stand LA. I hate LA people. And I don't blame them, just like, I don't blame them for just different reasons, just because, I was trying to raise kids in a weird part of the world, LA. But talk to me about, if you could talk a little bit about some of the memorable field pieces that you did, because I think one of the things that when the show began to get, after Sarah Lane's departure and Olivia Munn came in, and they had tested a bunch of people, like Whitney Cummings was one of the people considered to be host of Attack of the Show before Olivia became the host. But Olivia and Kevin had such a chemistry right off the bat that was it. It was almost like there was no argument about that. But when things started to really gel, what are some of the memorable field pieces that you participated in? And what are the stories from those pieces? One of the ones that was told to me by a couple people told this story, or told a version of this story. There's a lot of people were like, I'll have a story told, and like, I get 4 or 5 versions of it, and each person kind of tells a piece of it, which is fun. But one of the stories was when Kevin and Olivia went to Hawaii, and Olivia, like, Corrado was producing, and he wanted Olivia, obviously it's like, you're in Hawaii, there's a beach, come out in a bikini. And she's like, I'm not wearing it. She came out and she put on all of her clothes as like a joke. And then she came out and she wore a wetsuit, because she was just not going to pander and be sexualized in that way. Like, it was also like against the expectation, which I think is really, to me, that speaks to her personality. It's just like, here's what you're supposed to do. And she's like, nah, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to do this. And that I think in that way, that's how Kevin and Olivia bonded, is that they were both like, do this thing. Nope. And then they would flip it. And it was their personalities that drove it. And the reason I'm stalling and talking so much is because I want to, you have an opportunity to kind of jog that memory, every person, because by the time this documentary comes out, it'll be the 20th anniversary of Attack of the Show, or G4 TV, 20th anniversary of G4 TV, and 10 years since the show ended. So that's, cool. we want to show the movie in April, the first public screening in April. And hopefully as many people who were involved in the past, we're thinking about doing it in an outdoor venue, like a drive-in, so that cool. Like we can have like 500 or 600 people.
That's awesome.
And people can, and I have a venue in mind. But anyways, so can you talk about some of the memorable field pieces that became kind of, and also so we can find the footage? Because if you talk about something from a legal standpoint, based on fair use, if you talk about something, I can show video of it.
Yeah. So
we could just go through that, and then I want to, and then I got a bunch of other stuff. So I sent you the basic questions, but for certain folks, I have real specific ones I want to ask. And what were some of the memorable field pieces and your participation and memories of those pieces?
So, keeping in mind that Kevin and Olivia didn't do a ton of field pieces, because they were the main host, so they did a lot of studio stuff. So they didn't travel a ton. They would do bigger things, but so a lot of the field things were just the other correspondents. I have a number of those, yeah. So let me see here. So in 2005, so this one involves Brennan Moran, actually, and it was for a Foo Fighters concert, and this was probably one of my favorite memories. Unfortunately, it never aired, but I have the footage. And it's weird. I don't know why it didn't air. I'll just tell the story anyways. I don't know if you can use it, but
do you have the footage?
I do.
Okay, because we are.
I have photos and I have.
Okay, so Christopher Flynn has a hard drive with I have all my personal photos and video that I amassed, and part of this project kind of grew out of this other documentary I was working on, because I was doing archival, just like hard drives and this, and I for the Film Threat doc, we have like 100 hours of VHS footage shot in the 90s. It's gonna be a weird documentary. I'll send you the sizzle reel if you're curious.
Yeah, definitely.
But in any case, so we have footage from that. I have other footage coming, and I've got like just personal home footage that was shot like on Kevin's last day, you know, among other things. So we really want to have like a personal feel to this doc where it's like you're not only getting the stuff that like, yes, this is stuff that you saw, but stuff that you never saw, and a behind the scenes look. You're seeing the show in a way you've never seen it, because the show was in 480.
Yeah.
Think about it. When the show started, it wasn't until, when did it go HD? Was it 2010 maybe? I know it was really late in the game.
I think it was. And that's one of the things that's sort of tough, unfortunately, about this is it was standard def, and then kind of the beginning of HD is when the show was kind of ending. And then it was, you know, social media wasn't huge at first. It was just kind of starting. And so there wasn't the era of great camera phones. So you'd be on shoots, and it wasn't like today where you'd just be taking a million pictures and video and have a ton of stuff. It was before all that. We still had people had their flip phones or their trios, or, you know, and it didn't capture a lot of great stuff. So there, unfortunately, yeah, it's like the video I have, it would be like video that I dubbed off of a DV cam tape that I have. So,
but that's okay, because the whole vibe of the thing is like, once you get into it, it triggers like the memory of like, that's what TV looked like then. That's what cell phone footage looked like then. And I think audiences, because documentaries are such a popular category, it's one of the most popular categories on Netflix. And this, because the approach is, this is a historical period documentary that will be, so the tech that was used to capture images and video at that time will be the look of it. I mean, it really is. The doc is set between 2005 and 2012. I mean, it's, you know, there's going to be very little footage in this documentary that'll be shot present day. So I am asking everyone, like, Chris Flynn has a hard drive in Orlando, Florida, in a storage container that I got a guy going to the storage container with like doing FaceTime with Chris Flynn to like find the hard drive and ship it, make a copy and ship it back. So yeah, we're asking post the interview, I'll send you like sort of a deep, there it is.
It's the Foo Fighters concert.
Oh my God.
So I can tell you that story.
Oh my God. Okay. So yeah, I'm going to drop off and just allow you to rip into stories. But so every person I talk, not everybody has it, but it's like, oh, these are photos. Here's photos of me. Like, this is like, a lot of people are even having to do like archive, you know, look at their old Facebook. Like, what was I doing on Facebook in 2009? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, cool.
There's a ton of photos on there that I can pull off because there's pictures that other people took that I have. So,
well, let's hear these stories.
Okay, cool. All right. So probably my favorite memory of all time was something that unfortunately never aired, and it probably had something to do with rights and music and all that stuff. So Rhapsody Music had a contest. This was 2005. And winners of this contest would be on chartered flights to Roswell, New Mexico, at the airfield there to see the Foo Fighters play a concert at one of the airport hangars. G4 TV got to go along and shoot interviews and record the concert. So we got on a plane, and it was me and Brendan Moran and Brendan Hermes and Joe Schreit, my audio guy, and we boarded a plane in LA and flew to Roswell, New Mexico, and went and interviewed the band. We didn't interview Dave Grohl, unfortunately, but we interviewed the rest of the band. And got to shoot video of the concert. The funny thing about it was that Brendan Moran had a very, he was very wry. He had this kind of this style of his delivery where he was like, he's like interviewing Taylor Hawkins and asking him, about getting probed by an alien and all this stuff. And he's like chewing gum and acting very disinterested in the answers. And he's kind of looking away as he's just casually holding the microphone and asking these questions. So it was very fun and loose. And then they said, okay, they said to me, camera guy, you can go up to the front of the stage and you can shoot the first 30 seconds of the first 3 songs. I said, okay, cool. and I went up there, and I had a still photo camera and I had my video camera. So I went up to the front of the stage, and I'm basically looking right up the nose of the band, and I'm rolling video on it, and nobody came to get me. So for the first, it was maybe five songs, I just rolled on the songs, and I took a bunch of photos, and there's video of Dave Grohl running into the middle of the audience, and he's being lifted up and playing for them. And I just remember, like, I thought to myself, this is amazing. I've got like a ton of video of this. This is going to be a killer segment. I can't wait to see what they do with it when we get back. A little time went by, and for whatever reason, I was like, hey, whatever happened to that? And they couldn't air it. It had to do with some sort of rights thing. I don't know why we even went out there if we couldn't do it, but that was the real bummer thing. But I've got the video, so we can show that if you can. And it was just, that was a blast. That was the kind of stuff that we got to do with G4 TV and Attack of the Show, was fly out to random airports in the middle of New Mexico and shoot concerts. And it was me and 500 of my closest friends, and just partying it up and listening to one of the biggest bands of all time. So that was fucking incredible.
What are some of the field pieces you recall that involves Kevin and Olivia? Or it sounds weird, but even myself, like, because if I don't have someone talking about it, I can't show the footage. But I remember being disappointed when we'd ever go to a place and they wouldn't fly you guys out, or they wouldn't bring out, they'd hire local, which was kind of a bummer. Sometimes I think we did that maybe with Sundance. Am I wrong?
Well, Sundance, yeah. I mean, me, you, and Josh, and Monica Kuna.
Right. Yeah. And, I saw that.
Who Heather? Why am I blanking on her name now? Blonde Heather, producer, was there. What was her last name? I'm blanking on her name. But
Frank.
Heather Frank, yeah. So that was us going, and the funny thing about that is I just remember, we were like freezing our asses off out there doing interviews on Main Street, just trying to get hours and hours of interviews with everybody, freezing our butts off in the cold. But it was really fun, and then going inside to all the different parties and just kind of blinding people with our cameras, and so that's kind of. But I don't remember a ton of. Actually, the funny thing about that particular Sundance was Greg Bishop had his independent film was playing at Slam Dance that same time we were there, and we did an interview with him for that. So that, because he was an editor for the network, so that was kind of fun. There was South by Southwest, did that with, again, Monica and Zach Selwyn. So that was a lot of fun because we were covering South by Southwest. And that was fun. It was just that typical festival mentality. But I remember at the time, Zach Selwyn was also performing at one of the bars. So we were out like doing what was needed for Attack of the Show. And then that night we would go and he would himself perform at one of the bars, and he's just, he puts on a show. He was a great host, and he put on a great show. That was fun. I don't have a lot of details about that one. The ones that the ones it's pretty much like American Ninja Warrior when Kevin and Olivia went out. And then I remember going to Carnival in Rio de Janeiro with Sarah Jean Underwood. And
there has to be some amazing stories from Carnival with Sarah Jean Underwood.
Yeah, that was nuts. That was fucking crazy.
Describe it to me as best as you can. And what it was like to work with Sarah, who, my experience working with her, she was a sweetheart and a total professional, and just wanted to do a good job. Right. She was very, so what can you tell me about that?
So yeah, we flew down to go do cover Carnival, which, at the time, I guess they didn't let a lot of people in the back. So you have Carnival, and if anybody knows anything about Carnival, it's just this huge parade. But they had, let me try to remember this because it was a while ago, but I just want to remember how the setup. So we flew down, and none of us had been there before. So it was just a blast. Rio de Janeiro was amazing. And I remember, we went up to the favelas. We actually brought our cameras, and we all went up there, and Sarah Jean was up there, and she's super sweet, super fun, and just a totally genuine person. And we went up to the favelas to just kind of get video of basically the slums of Rio de Janeiro. And then we would go around and we did interviews. She did a cooking segment where she learned how to do some, Brazilian cooking. I don't remember she learned like a dance thing. I feel like there was like a dance segment part of that. And then I remember like just these traveling, it was like a truck with a flatbed and a DJ, and it was a traveling party, and they were all over the city. You would just hear music, and all of a sudden you would see like these flatbed trucks pulling the DJs and a people partying around it, and you would just kind of jump in and start partying and dancing with everybody, and then it would move on down the street and you would wander around. But the night of Carnival, she got dressed up, the producer got dressed up, and we went basically behind the scenes, which a lot of, you don't really see a lot of that. So it was me and her and a PA. And that was it. The audio guy couldn't go. Aaron couldn't go in because Aaron, AP was on this, but they wouldn't allow that many people back there with her. Even the producer, Brian, couldn't go. So it was me, and I had the list of questions. And I had to rig her up with audio, and she had her big costume on. And of course, it was, very revealing, as Carnival should be. And I just remember before they jumped in with the parade and actually went around and did the whole thing that Carnival is, just this big parade of people in costumes and floats. Before that, we did interviews kind of in the staging area behind. And I just remember when people saw her and they saw, what she looked like in this outfit, we were immediately surrounded by all of these other media outlets from Brazil and other parts of the country. And it was actually kind of scary at first because we didn't have security. It was just her, me, the PA, this girl. And, it's like I'm sitting there doing the best I can to not be rude and keep her from getting mobbed by these people, while they're trying to interview her and ask her questions, and I'm like, no, we've got a job to do here ourselves. And she did a great job of just keeping her composure and not freaking out, because I don't know how she did that, but it was pretty overwhelming. But then, I think a lot of the local security showed up and kind of cooled things off. And then the producer came and grabbed her, and they actually jumped into the parade that they had permission to do. And so they went around, and it was pretty chaotic. The pictures of the outfit were pretty funny. And so that was pretty wild. I remember that was just kind of being a hairy time of being mobbed by a bunch of people that wanted to go, wow, this really good looking girl in this outfit, let's go interview her, and she's an American. I guess they didn't see a lot of us in the behind the scenes part back then. So that's that story. That's kind of Carnival in a nutshell. It was, I'm sure, maybe AP remembers others, and it was Brian, Hoffman. So yeah, it was Brian Hoffman. So he would have other stories about that, about Carnival. One of the cool things that we ended up doing is, here's the other one I remember. Thank God I wrote it down. We went to Ipanema Beach, and we actually went to this bikini shop. The bikini shop was owned by the little girl from Ipanema. If anybody remembers that song, the song was written by two guys that used to sit at this bar on the corner of this street in Ipanema. At the time, there was this 13-year-old girl that would walk by every day going to and from school and back to home. They wrote this song about her. She, years later, opened up a bikini shop next to this bar. So we went there and did an interview with her. So it's a kind of a really interesting thing that the actual girl from Ipanema was somebody we interviewed, and she just opened up next door to this bar that the song was written about her. So that was pretty wild. So that's Carnival, yeah. And I have a picture of me with the girl from Ipanema, which is kind of neat.
I never knew that story. I didn't know it was a real person. That's weird.
They were the fact that these guys would write it about this 13-year-old girl, but I mean, it's, you know, South America. So
that's crazy. That's crazy. What, before I move on, I just want to make sure if there's any other stories that stand out about the field pieces that you did and kind of, you know, what that experience was like. My recollection of it was, one, it never felt like work to me when I was with you guys. Like, it never felt like work. Every person was really committed to doing a good job or contributing some idea that would be worthwhile. I do recall that Corrado would hand me like a giant thing and just say, okay, well, just say this. And I'm like, dude, I'm not an actor. Like, I can't memorize this stuff. If you hold it for me or whatever, or I can get through, you can have me read it and use the audio and do cutaways, but I said I can't do it.
Okay.
Corrado was really a gem as a producer. A lot of thoughts, and I can't wait to talk to him. Because even to this day, it's so funny. I ran into someone who worked with him. It's like, oh yeah, that guy likes to shoot a lot of B-roll. Who was it? I think it was John Gardner, actually. One of the guys. He was like a stringer freelancer. They'd bring in every once in a while. They were overbooked. John is great. I interviewed John. He had unbelievable stories because he was in the studio whenever they did anything big. So he was there. He witnessed it. But I just want to make sure there's any, like, especially involving Kevin and Olivia, if you have any anecdotes, you know, about, even because we worked together a lot. And I just remember, like, everyone made it easy. I didn't even realize you were a producer, but it doesn't surprise me. And I think maybe you had mentioned that, you know, like, and the thing is that what I loved was just sort of like, as things would be like, we're in 14 hours and it's just like, I think we have enough B-roll, you know, like, I think we're good. I think we can wrap everybody and we can just go out. I know for myself, like, I like to party and have fun, but I could not, until we were done with work, I couldn't have that first taste of beer. You know what I mean? Like, I just feel right about it. It's like, I'm going to have a beer when I know I'm done. That way I can enjoy it and not like be drinking while I'm working. It just never flew for me. But or any sort of thoughts before we move on to other stuff about field stuff and memories, and especially involving maybe you know, Kevin and Olivia, and or stuff you were at San Diego Comic-Con, right? Like,
yeah.
So maybe focus it on like memories of San Diego Comic-Con and what it was like to work there. And then I have a really specific last question about field shoots. So really specific. Okay. Well, yeah, let's talk about Comic-Con.
Yeah. Let me try to remember. The funny thing about that is, there was, all right, so we were all very young, 20s, 30s. Everybody took their job seriously, but also took the fun seriously. There was, plenty of drinking, plenty of nightlife. Everybody couldn't wait to wrap up the shoot to go and enjoy the parties and have a lot of fun doing that. Comic-Con's wild. I mean, it's just a crush of people. And at the time, you know, Kevin and Olivia, they did their stage stuff. So pretty much the field correspondence, that's the thing, is like, sorry, Chris, they did a lot of the studio stuff. They didn't, and I'm not remembering it, and at least maybe I didn't do a lot with them. With Comic-Con, it was mostly, let me think. I remember
Comic-Con was like all hands on deck. It was all hands on deck, and you're doing this, you're doing that, you know.
It was just like hours, endless hours on the floor, either going someplace to do interviews with whoever, or endless hours on the main convention floor.
I remember doing field pieces on the floor at Comic-Con and running into Blair Butler, who was also doing field pieces on the floor at Comic-Con, and then running into Zach Selwyn, who was also doing field pieces. So we would, like, the crews would kind of like run into each other, and I'd have like a window of time of like, you're doing these 5, you know, segments, and you're going to work from X to X. And it was always, for me, it was a very reasonable schedule. Crew, though, was like really pushed to the limit, I remember. But here's a specific question. Maybe this will jog a memory, and this relates to San Diego Comic-Con. When did you know, and when did you realize this little show on this nothing cable network. When you were out doing a field piece, when did you begin to recognize that, oh, the hosts are being like recognized now? When did you notice that, like, oh wait, there are like fans of people of the show, not just the show, but of the personalities that appeared on the show? When did that begin to manifest, in real life? Like you're doing a field piece, they're like, look, you can't, like, we got to move it along, or the producer had to kind of like keep away some people. Selfies were just beginning to become a thing, right? Because now we were all had these devices. When did you begin to notice that? Do you have a specific maybe moment or story to talk about where you were doing a field piece and, someone was recognized and it was like, oh, wow, like people are seeing our work. People are seeing the work that we're doing here is seen by a lot of people and appreciated by them. Do you have a specific story or memory you can tell about that?
My memory may be a little fuzzy just because, you remember there weren't a lot of crews. It was like me and Ryan Graham. We did the field. Well, first it was Joe Lynch, and then it was me and Joe Lynch were the first two field shooters, and then after Joe left, it was Ryan Graham, and that was it. It was just two crews. So we did everything. So there were so many of those that they just all blend together. You're right. We'd be on the show floor, and I'd be walking along with either Kevin or Olivia going to go either do an interview or cover an event, and we couldn't. It's like I had my little cart with my batteries and my camera bag, and I'd have the camera over my shoulder. My audio guy would, Josh would have his audio gear, and we'd be trying to squeeze through, and we couldn't get 5 feet without somebody just trying to stop and get a picture. And it got to the point, and we didn't have, especially, and this was like early, like 2007, 2008, we didn't have a lot of security for them because it was still sort of a growing thing. And we'd get stopped and we couldn't go 5 feet without people wanting to take pictures. And eventually it would get so tight that I would you would just have to push through people and ignore people and try not to be jerks about it. But nothing crazy. The thing is, I did a lot of stuff for X-Play. I did probably more with X-Play than I did with Attack of the Show, just because they like to use me all the time. So that's why I'm having a hard time remembering things with Kevin and Olivia outside of like the larger. So like we went and did American Ninja Warrior. When that first started, they had a contest for the 3 guys to bring over there, and that was the very first American Ninja Warrior. And I remember just going over there with John Ryber and Aaron Murray, and it was these 3 guys, and it was just us going to do this. And Kevin and Olivia were there just to kind of report from the field, but then I believe they got to remind me. I don't know. Did they get to compete? So this is where my memory's getting fuzzy, because a lot of this stuff just blends together.
Yeah, I mean, because it was like the day-to-day grind. It was just
they got to try to run the course, I believe.
Right. That one I don't remember specifically, but I was a watcher of the show. I just watched everything except for myself because I couldn't stand to watch myself on TV because I was just cringe. But yeah, no, you're right. It does kind of blend together. There's sort of like these sort of like core, but like, and what's weird is that going through footage, I'm like, I don't remember most of this. I'm watching, going like, I remember kind of like the big things that kind of blew up sort of in the media, like Olivia jumping in the pie with,
I wasn't ever a part of that stuff. So that was all.
But don't worry, I've got like 9 different people telling that story from, it's like the Zapruder film now, we'll probably do a reenactment with like dolls and like a, each angle being covered. This person was here, and that it'll be kind of crazy, but yeah. So
because like I went to me and I don't remember if it was Josh or if it was Aaron, AP. If we went, it was Kevin, and we went to Mexico for the Mexico the Mexico E3. But I don't remember. It was kind of uneventful. We just went and did it. There was nothing crazy about that. And that's the bummer thing is like I didn't do as much stuff with Kevin and Olivia other than And on the bigger shows, like I just remember, yeah, American Ninja Warrior, they got to run the initial part of the course. Of course, they didn't get very far, but it was just fun. And I remember, Olivia, because she's part, I want to say Japanese, right? So there was a lot of hijinks with being able to speak Japanese a little bit, and I'm just they just she kind of was in the hotel, went to the shoots, and then didn't go out. So I wasn't around her that much, or Kevin, other than like it was more like I was with the producers like Corrado, the endless amounts of B-roll and the long shoots where I was like, I think we got it. And he just kept going. And me and Corrado had that relationship where it was, okay, dude, we got enough. We got enough.
Yeah.
He's like, no, no, and there's a lot of that.
Can you walk me through like from your perspective, what was sort of a day in the life, right? I'm doing a day in the life of shooting in the studio, a day in the life of like, what's a day in the life of we're doing a field shoot? It's up in the morning, going through planning. We have all this stuff to do. Can you walk through like an A to Z, nuts and bolts for to give people a sense of, hey, we're going to do a field shoot. What's that like? And especially because there was so much creative freedom.
Yeah. Yeah, and unfortunately, my best story didn't involve Attack of the Show. It was for a pilot that we did in South Korea where I almost got killed by pimps. So that unfortunately, I wish that was an Attack of the Show story because that would have been the best.
Well, again, I wish we had footage from it so you could tell it. But I mean, look, tell that story. But like, let's hear the ones that relate directly to the doc. But I'd like to hear this story because I don't know about this.
That's fucking wild. Well, all right, I'll just get that one out of the way. So there was a pilot with Morgan Webb that was called Siberia, and it was being shot in South Korea, Seoul, South Korea. And they had gone over previously before. We did 2 shoots there, and I didn't do the first one. They had done a shoot, and then they'd come back, and they needed to go back to get more footage. So I went on the second shoot, and it was with Wade Bennett, John Ryber, Morgan, Aaron, and Vinny Rutherford. And that was just a party. It was fun. And we got all that footage. But one night they wanted to get video of the red light district in Seoul. And so we got in the car and we had our fixer, which is a local producer. That's what they call a fixer. A local producer who can translate and coordinate and get you places. We were in her boyfriend's car. He was driving. I was in the front seat with him. She was in the back seat with Wade. He was the EP at the time. And we went to the red light district, which was basically just like this alley. It was like storage container type things with glass windows where these girls were just sitting there. And the idea was we would just drive by while I had the camera kind of pointing out the window, getting video of this. And I don't know what we were going to do with it or how it was going to be used, but they just wanted to get video of this. So we drove through, and it was kind of quick. And I stupidly was like, I think we need to do it again. I need better video of that. So we went through, unbeknownst to us, they had seen us drive through the first time. So when we came back around, a bunch of guys, presumably the pimps for all the girls, jumped out in the middle of this alley and blocked our car and surrounded us and immediately started trying to open up the door. And so it was scary. They were going to kill us. It was like, they did not want us shooting video. They were trying to open up the windows. They were pounding on the windows. I pulled like the old journalist switcheroo and I popped the videotape out, very slyly, and, reached down between the back seat and slipped it to the executive producer, Wade, and said, give me a blank tape. And he gave me a blank tape and I put it in the camera because I knew we weren't going to get out of there unless we opened up the door and talked to these guys. And if they were going to do that, I was going to have to show them that I had no video on this camera. So eventually we opened up the door and the guy leaned in and he was pissed and he was going to do bodily damage to us. Luckily, the fixer kind of calmed him down and convinced him to let me show him on the camera the video and show that it was blank and I had nothing on there. And he looked at it, and there were some words exchanged in Korean, and it looked very tense. And he kind of shoved the driver, the fixer's boyfriend. And eventually the guy said, "Give me the tape." So I took the tape out and gave it to him, and he stared at it. And there was just a moment where it was like, oh man, we're goners. And then he backed up, and they spread apart, and we were able to close the door and drive away. And I remember for like 10 minutes, it was silent inside the car, and we just drove down the road. And it took like 10 minutes for the guy to realize we were driving in a complete wrong direction. We were just driving because everybody was so stunned that just happened. So yeah, that was insane.
How did Morgan react to that?
She wasn't in the car. So it was just me, Wade, the fixer, and the boyfriend. We were just going to get video of that.
Like, oh my God. But she must have heard about it.
Yeah, we got back. When we got back, at the hotel, there was an Irish bar in Seoul at the bottom of the hotel. And we got back, and everybody was there hanging out. And that's when we told the story. And
oh my God. Oh man. And you got that footage. Wow. Did that pilot never aired or never went?
It never aired. And I don't know what happened to the footage.
They were always doing that. Like I did a pilot with them called Grindcore, and I think they did like 3 episodes.
Yeah.
I think they just aired them like just to get rid of them because they were doing pilots because it's like, well, we have these resources. Let's just make stuff and see what sticks. And I think I did 3 episodes of that. I don't even know where that. I'm sure I have it. Pretty sure I have. But
I'll walk you through just to get the field shoot stuff.
Yeah. Let's do a date. Like because also I want this to be like for those who are, fans of the show, like, well, what was it like to work on the show? What is even the process? And I think that's fascinating. And of course, it'll be done in a fun way, but like, tell me about like how to do a field piece for Attack of the Show.
Yeah. So there was all kinds of different field packages they would do. We call them field packages. There was always kinds of different field shoots, everything that was, very basic. So, we would do ones where Blair Butler we'd go to the Meltdown Comics, and that's where it would be talking about the latest comic book releases. Is it Blair Butler? She did do that, right? Pretty sure it was Blair Butler.
It was Blair.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure. So I'll tell that story.
A comic book piece. Yeah. Sorry, I'm pouring my drink. It's okay.
Nice. Yeah, so we would do like Meltdown Comics. We would go with Blair Butler and the producer Corrado, and that was real. That was just kind of a basic thing. We'd go in, they'd let us in, and she would talk about the various comics that were being released that were very popular at the time. And we would that was simple. It was me with a camera and a light on top of the camera and maybe a camera on a light stand. And we would just shoot. She would talk to camera. That was very straightforward, where it was, 4 or 5 different setups, talking to camera, and then getting B-roll of the comic book store. So that was pretty basic, and that would take a few hours. That was nothing. Sometimes we'd go to a location where it'd just be interviews, where you would set up a basic sit-down interview. Those were easy, and it was just, I had a van with a bunch of gear, and we would just unload and kind of set up lights and do whatever to go to do whatever was needed to be shot. It was very simple kind of stuff. It would be all the way to very expensive, or not expensive, let me rephrase that. Then there would be other shoots where it would be a lot more elaborate. And in fact, there's one where we would go down, there was like in downtown LA, there was, places to shoot. What do we call that? It's not sound stages. Remember where we would set up?
I know exactly where we went. We went to Chinatown in downtown LA.
Yeah.
And shot Asian Underground. And I think we did like 2 or 3 segments in one day. It was a lot. It was a lot to discuss all at once.
Yeah.
It was in a way, it was sort of like a DVD's Day thing. But yeah, that was one of the places we shot. And then we shot at a used video game and DVD store on the West Side. We shot there also. These are just some of and Corrado was always looking for some interesting location. And then finally it's just like, that's not the important part. The important part of this is the talking about the movies and cutting to footage of those movies, not the location where we're standing and talking for which you're going to see for 20 seconds. That wasn't the important part, right? The important part was the content of our conversation and then the seeing footage from the movies that we're talking about. So eventually we just this DVD.
Yeah, let me just tell that. So I'll just kind of wrap that one up.
Sorry. Didn't
As far as like
Blair Butler, I love that segment. She was so great. Okay.
They're fun. And then you'd have more elaborate shoots where we'd be, there'd be a lot more set design. We would have a much bigger space, and I would need to light this. And a lot of times I didn't even get any help. It would just be me and the other guy trying to hang lights, run cable. We'd have a smoke machine. We have a bunch of different set design. We would try to, use as much lights as I had in my van. And so the setups would take, 3 or 4 hours just to get them. And then we would do these like walk and talk things through an alley, or through a hallway. And of course, multiple takes of that. And it would look really good. It would look, a lot of depth and look expensive. And so it would run that gamut. It would be the very simple run and gun, camera on the shoulder, shoot whatever you can, get it and go, to these elaborate lit smoke, set design, smoke in the room to make it look, fancy or creepy or whatever we were going for. And lots of that kind of stuff. So that was the kind of a day in the life of what you never knew what you were going to get, whether it was just going to be something short and sweet, or something that was going to take 12 to 15 hours to get there at, the crack of dawn, light, shoot for 8 hours, and then break everything down and drive back to the studio. And it got kind of exhausting, but fun in the end.
I was lucky because I got to do the fun part, and you guys worked your asses off. So I feel
it was pretty rough sometimes.
Let's talk about the end. I have two big questions. One big question is, when did you know, like, oh, it's going to end? I mean, for you, it might not have even changed things because you could go and work for other networks, right, within the same company umbrella. But when did you know it was the end? What was the vibe and what was the feeling among people? How did people respond to the news that, the network was over in 2012?
So the one thing about the show is that everybody kind of knew you could watch our commercials and get an idea of where the network was at. We never had like, your typical commercials you would see playing during, regular primetime network TV. These were, local or lower budget commercials, and that gave you an idea who was sponsoring stuff. And that was like that for years. And so everybody was kind of astonished, like, how is this network staying on the air all this time? We're not getting the greatest sort of advertising, but it managed to stay on the air for a long time, surprisingly. But there was always talk. We always thought, like, it was probably 2010. I think there was a lot of, there was a lot of shakeup, and there was changing of management. There was changing of, some formats. And it was like, any day now, there's no way that this network can keep going, and then we would switch hosts, after Olivia left. That's when people really started to think, like, what's going to happen now? We're going to get a new host. What did that mean when Olivia left? Did that mean the show wasn't doing anymore? Did she know something that, the rest of us didn't, or was it just capitalizing on a perfect time for her career? And so there was always that talk around 2010 on that, the writing was on the wall. And but still spending money hand over fist. The shoots were still big, still spending a lot on all these elaborate things and the Comic-Cons and stuff like that. And it was probably 2011 when, actually I don't remember when Esquire kind of became the thing, and things were kind of taken over. So you can talk about that. I don't remember exactly, but I knew there was a culture shift there, and it was kind of starting to become obvious in 2011 that this wasn't going to go very far anymore. There was talk. People were, the rumor mill started to go. It sounded like Esquire was going to kind of phase it out and just start be their own network without G4 TV, because we were under Esquire management at the time. And it was just that rumor mill. And then you could start to see, I'd seen this before, where it seemed like you could shoot anything. They were producing whatever, because nobody really cared anymore, because it was like something was already planned. Like they already knew, like, we're going to cancel this, so run out the budget, shoot whatever the heck we're going to do, produce, put whatever content we can out there. And there wasn't a lot of oversight in a way, because who cared? They were going off the air in a while. And then it was, I remember the final day they brought us, it was like in shifts. They brought us into a room to make the announcement that at the end of 2012, I think that's when it was, the end of 2012, the network was going off the air. And I felt bad. It was cool because I was there at the very beginning, and it was just to be there at the very end. I was there before it was on the air, and then I got to watch it go off the air, and I was there the whole time. That was fun, and that was exciting to be able to be a part of that. Sad to see it go, because I knew I was staying within the network, within the NBC Universal Network, to continue to shoot for their other network shows, the other cable shows that were on, E! Entertainment and that kind of stuff, Esquire. And I continued to shoot for E! and Esquire after G4 went off the air. Yeah, so it was bittersweet because I got to kind of continue shoot with some people, but other people had to leave, and to kind of just see it go like that, it was time, and everybody kind of knew that we had to kind of move on with our careers and find other things and evolve into other things. But at the same time, it was sad to see it go the way it did. It would have been nice to see it kind of evolve into the next phase, which now it's going to, which is kind of neat. It's really cool.
Now, I've never heard of, in the history of television, something like this, where a network goes away and then comes back. I mean, networks go away, they sort of have their time, but to have it come back and then, I don't know. I mean, look, they do reboots a reboot is a thing, I guess. They reboot franchises of movies like Star Wars and Star Trek and whatnot, but this is really historically kind of a new and interesting thing. I guess my final question, maybe final two questions. First question, my last question is just going to be, did I forget to ask anything? So if there's anything I forgot to ask, or that you feel like you want to make sure to do that at the end. But my last question really is, what are your thoughts on the legacy of G4 TV and Attack of the Show, and how it impacted pop culture? Because previous to the existence of G4 TV, being a nerd was a point of shame. It was, you're a person who's not getting laid, you care more about your comics and video games and toys than real life, which might be still true for some of us, but you know what I mean? And now we live in a world where that is celebrated culture. Like, that is just, now that sort of nerd world is a celebrated mainstream thing. I mean, Marvel movies are now the biggest movies, right? Marvel and spectacle films are the biggest films. But what is your perspective on the legacy of Attack of the Show, and what it will mean now to future generations?
Yeah, I'll just kind of start quickly in the beginning. So in the beginning, it was fun I had played video games as a kid, and then when I was working at E! before I started at G4, I didn't play video games. And then when I went over there, I was familiar with them, but I didn't play them a lot, and then when I went over there, of course, I immersed myself in it because that was what I had to do as a producer. And I got into it. I thought it was fun. The culture was kind of, everybody's like, oh, the nerd culture, and you made fun of it. But it wasn't. It was like, these are all very awesome people that were dedicated to this particular lifestyle. And it was eye-opening because I hadn't experienced it before. And then, yeah, you're right. When G4 kind of went off the air and then came back in 2004 as this re-envisioned network, it was still like, there wasn't much nerd culture there. I mean, the nerd culture was still like a subculture, still like this sort of mocked thing. And then I remember, they had the Daredevil movies, they had X-Men, and you had Iron Man. And it seemed like that was sort of and Spider-Man. And that was nerd culture, that the comic book world went mainstream. And with it, it elevated G4. It was the popularity of those movies lifted G4's kind of status as this sort of beacon of nerd culture, where it became cool. It became okay to be like this, to live like this, to have the comics and the different statues and the toys and all this different thing. And I always thought these people were cool. I mean, some of it was like, wow, nerdsville, nerd alert, because some people were real extreme about it. But at the same time, it was like, because you go to Comic-Con and people are dressed up, and there's extremes of anything are kind of odd, and you kind of look sideways at it. But it was also, these people were just cool. They were just having fun. They were just enjoying the thing that they want, that they really loved. And you had to kind of be there on the ground level to kind of meet these people, to realize these are just regular people. They're just interested in a thing that the mainstream's not. And then as the mainstream part of it grew, it got co-opted like everything does. And when studios and culture sees money, potential for money, that's when nerd culture got really elevated to something more respectable. And of course, you saw that with famous actors starting to do superhero movies and stuff like that. So it was cool to see the rise of this thing, how it started and got elevated into a more respectable thing. Because it made money, sure, but it was still kind of neat to see that go mainstream and not have it be in the basement anymore.
What is there anything I didn't ask that you feel is important?
No, I mean, this covers it. That's pretty much everything I remember. And we've covered. Yeah.
Well, yeah. Mike Dunn, I want to thank you not just for being in the doc, but all the years that we worked together.
Yeah.
As always, when I was doing a field shoot and I saw your face, I knew I was in good hands.